On today's show, we'll be covering shadow entities, sleep paralysis, doppelgangers, and much more. All coming up on this episode of Paranormal Mysteries. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to another week of Paranormal Mysteries. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. I hope everyone had a great weekend, and before we start today's episode, I'd like to thank Steve for their support and generosity. And if you enjoy the show, please consider following, sharing, and reviewing the podcast. This supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. You can also support us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries. or by donating at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. And if you'd like to share your paranormal encounter on the podcast, you can write to me at paranormalmysteriesPodcast@gmail.com or by visiting our website at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com. Or if you prefer to record your experience and send it to me, you can now do this on our website as well. You can also visit speakpipe.com/paranormalmysteries and record your story there. These links can all be found in the show notes. And with that in mind, tonight's first story comes to us from Michael, and Michael's story is called Shadow Entity and Ghost Cat. Michael says, "Hello, I am a continued listener of your podcast. You read one of my stories back in October of 2019, and for that I am grateful. I have 2 more stories for you. I've always grown up around people with paranormal experiences, and my fiancée has had multiple experiences, and this is a story that she told me. In the year 2005 or 2006, my fiancée was in high school. Her friend Sarah was having family troubles, and my fiancée invited her to stay at her house until it was resolved. Sarah at the time was heavily into goth and occult stuff. She dressed the part, and in a way it was an outlet for whatever family problems she had going on. During her stay at my fiancé's home, her life started to return to normal, and by this I mean she started to get back to a regular sleep pattern. Her grades went back up, and so on. One night, Sarah decided to play with a Ouija board by herself in my fiancé's bedroom. She thought she was going in there to get changed or take a nap, but she was taking longer than usual. Sarah said some ritual stuff and then proceeded to ask questions. With each question she asked, the dial moved to no and spelled out hateful words. And as the night progressed, weirder things started to happen. A loud bang and a voice laughing here and there. And then she stopped playing. When my fiancée entered the room, she saw that clothes were scattered all over the place and all the furniture drawers were open. It was like a bomb went off, and stranger things started to happen. At night, my fiancée would go to the bathroom and see a shadow run down the hall. And when she'd leave the bathroom, she'd hear footsteps running down the hall chasing her. At night, my fiancée said she'd hear breathing and whispering in her ears, and she said it even touched her one night. She felt a hand grab her arm, and her entire arm started to tingle, and then it went numb. The numbing feeling moved up to her ear, and she then heard a static ringing in her ear, and a voice of a man speaking in different languages very fast. She freaked out and slept in the living room. Another evening, she fell asleep with her retainer in her hand. When she woke up, it was gone. She thought, well, maybe it fell on the floor and it's under the bed, which seemed logical enough. So she leaned over and looked under the bed, but saw nothing. Running late for school, she decided to search for it later. When she got home from school, her grandma was visiting with her mom, and she told them about the retainer, and they decided to help her look for it. Now, this is a relatively small and clean room, so it couldn't have gotten far. They tore the room apart. They stripped the bed, flipped the mattress, and moved furniture, and the retainer could not be found anywhere in the room. Days of searching in the home went by, and the retainer was nowhere in sight. One evening, she went to bed like normal and slept through the night. The next morning, she woke up in the same position, only to find when she awoke, the retainer was in her hand, as if someone had placed it there. This freaked her out, and she told her mom. Her mom told her that while she was watching TV that evening, she heard an evil growl coming from her dark closet, which backed up to my fiancé's closet. Her 4 cats sat on her mom's bed and growled back at the closet. Her mom was freaked out by it, and this was a nightly occurrence. On another evening, my fiancé went to bed, and she said that in the middle of the night, she woke up with a tight feeling on her chest, like someone was sitting on her. She then woke up and saw a shadow figure floating over her. Terrified to move and worried it would attack, she had to lay there staring at the black mass. She could feel its breath on her face, and the only thing she could do was close her eyes and fall back asleep. The cats began to sleep with her at the foot of the bed, and the cat would do the Halloween cat pose and stare at the corner of her room and closet all night long. The years would go on with the same encounters, but finally she was able to leave her home for college. Back at her house, her sister's friend needed a place to crash. He was a tall, muscular fellow, about 6'3", and her mom said that he could sleep in my fiancé's room while she was gone. As the night went on, he left the room and told her mom he couldn't sleep in there because he saw a man standing in the corner. He heard growling from the closet, and stuff would fly across the room. He was freaked out, and he had to leave the home. Since being at college, my fiancé was finally happy to get away from the entity, and things seemed to return to normal. But a couple of months into college, her roommates started to notice weird stuff happening. Lights flickering, loud bangs, laughing, and a shadow figure running down the hall. She knew then and there that it had followed her, and she thought it was attached to her. My fiancé went back home and did a bunch of research on every type of religious ritual she could try to get rid of it. She did seances, incense, she did it all. One of the last things she did was to destroy the Ouija board. She tore it up into several pieces and buried it throughout her yard in random spots. And after that, the activity stopped. To this day, she will not touch, look at, or play with a Ouija board. And that's one experience that I'm glad that didn't come with her now that we live together. This next story is about her family, more recently, as of October or November of 2020. As we all know, 2020 was a tough year, but more tough for my fiancé as her grandfather was diagnosed with cancer a while back. It was slowly killing him. We curse him for his smoking habits that started at 7 years old. In our home, we have 2 cats, a black and white cat and a tabby, as well as a small black dog. Early on in October of 2020, my fiancé told me that she was seeing a black and white cat around the house. I just laughed and said, "Yeah, that's our cat." But she said no. I've been seeing this other cat all week walking around a corner, catching its tail whip back and forth. At first, she thought it was our cat, but then when she looked around, our cat would be sleeping in the other room. She thought she was going crazy. A week goes by, and she didn't see it again. And then one evening around 11 p.m., I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and I saw a black and white cat walk in front of the couch, and all I caught was its tail and back fur. I thought it was our cat, so I leaned over the front of the couch to see where he was going, but when I looked, he was gone. Now the corner of our couch butts up to a wall, both side and back, and there's no way the cat can go between that. There was nowhere for him to go but on top of the couch. I was puzzled. I looked under the side table, and there was nothing. I looked around and found my black and white cat sleeping across the room. There's no way he could have walked around and then got to the area he was sleeping in less than 1 second. It was weird. I wasn't scared, and I didn't have any fear. I was just confused. I saw it as clear as day, but the experience left me speechless. The entire week, I saw this black and white cat. It was in my office walking under my desk, turning a corner, and bolting across the hall. Anytime it was spotted, you never saw its face. You'd only see him enough to catch a quick glimpse of a part of his body, a tail, a paw, or his back. I didn't know what seeing this cat meant, so I did research and tried to find ghost cat meaning, but I didn't find much, and I wanted to know what it meant. Growing up, my mom said that if you see a shadow a couple of days in a row, it means someone close to you is going to die, and they are coming to say goodbye, like some sort of premonition. It's happened to me 3 times in my life when someone was either sick or it was their time. I thought maybe this was a sign that her grandfather was going to pass soon. So I told her the next day, and she said, "See, I told you I've been seeing a ghost cat," and I immediately took it more seriously. I told her about the shadows I saw as a kid, and I told her to go and see her grandfather all of that week, just in case. She was completely freaked out by the weird occurrence, but took my advice and visited him more frequently throughout the week. And unfortunately, due to COVID, the visits were short and limited. About a couple of weeks later, we stopped seeing the cat, and the day before Thanksgiving of 2020, he died in the morning. I never saw the cat again after that. It almost reminded me of the movie Mothman Prophecies, an entity showing up to warn or have premonition of something to come. Same with the cat, it only shows up to tell us something. It's funny too because her grandfather loved cats and rescued them, so maybe in some weird coincidence he was visiting us as a cat in the afterlife version. While I have had my own theory of seeing it, if any of you have had similar experiences, please share. I'm curious as to what the supernatural phenomenon of seeing a ghost cat represents. Thank you for sharing my stories. Our next story of the night comes to us from Clay, and Clay's story is called Sleep Paralysis or Demon. Clay says, "Hi Nick, I've been listening to your stories lately and wanted to share my personal experience with you and the other listeners. So when I was about 15 or 16 years old, my dad had bought a house from a sheriff's sale. It was pretty beat up and needed a lot of work, but when it was finally fixed up enough, my dad, me, and my older brother moved in. Me and my brother were sharing a room at that time because the adjacent room that was going to be mine, we had ripped out all the drywall in. My mattress was on the floor, and my brother's bed was on the other side of the room, and we were both asleep. Then I woke up, and I remember laying on my left side facing my brother across the room, and he was facing the opposite direction, snoring loudly. My left shoulder was sore, so I tried to roll over, but I couldn't. I could barely move at all, and when I tried to call out to my brother, I could only barely whisper. I began to panic because I was sure I was being abducted by aliens. I began scanning the room with my eyes because that's all I could really move at the time, and I discovered that there was a large circular black mass about 5 feet by 5 feet hovering on the other side of the room. I could see everything in the room because my eyes were adjusted to the dark. This thing was blacker than the darkness around it, and it might sound funny, but when I saw this thing, I thought to myself, thank God I'm not being abducted by aliens. It's just a demon. I don't know if it could read my thoughts or if it just noticed my sigh of relief, but immediately after I did this, it attacked me. I don't think it moved any closer to me, but what it did was make a strange noise in my ear that felt like a cross between TV static and the sound of a faucet running full blast, but definitely not either one. This static noise made my eyes water and it felt weird as hell. It was penetrating only through my right ear, going deeper and deeper into my head. I could feel the noise filling up the right side of my head, and on my face, filling up my head till it got past my nose. I didn't know what its goal was, but I knew that I couldn't let it finish what it wanted to do to me. Still unable to move, I focused and visualized my energy to force it out of my head and out of my ear. When I forced it out, I thought it was over, and I let my guard down, and immediately it started to try and get into my ear and fill my head up again. Again, I focused this thing out of my head. This happened 4 or 5 times before I realized it wasn't going to stop, and I had to do something to make this thing that was attacking me in my bedroom go away. I then focused and visualized my energy forcing the noise out of my head and far across the room into the opposite corner from me. I then looked at this black mass, and I was still unable to speak, but under the impression that this thing could read my thoughts, and I told it, "I'm stronger than you. You cannot win this. Get out of my house and never come back." After doing this, it just disappeared and I could move again. I sat up in my bed and looked at my brother who was still snoring away. I didn't feel the need to wake him because I wasn't scared anymore, and I actually felt proud of myself, and I just went back to sleep. Other things have happened in my house afterwards, just not quite like that, and I still hear noises sometimes. Maybe I'll send another story of mine later. Our next story comes to us from Julie, and Julie says, "Hello. I have been to a couple psychics and neither visit was planned. The first psychic saw my photo when my friend was seeing him, and he insisted on meeting me, saying, 'I need to meet her. She has powers I haven't seen in anyone before.' The second time I was in a crystal shop in California, and one of the psychics came up to me and described my experiences, specifically vivid dreams. He also mentioned that I'm scared of my psychic abilities, and he was absolutely correct. I think I suppress a lot of these abilities, but occasionally they come through. I've had some dreams of people dying that I know, and they have come true. One experience, which wasn't a dream, still haunts me. I am a registered nurse, and this particular night I was working on a unit that is haunted. Multiple coworkers as well as patients have experienced voices, ghost sightings, doors opening with no one around, etc. So at the time, my next-door neighbor was ill with cancer. She was at home on hospice, but was still active and not expected to pass in the near future. One night I was working on this unit by myself, and I distinctly heard my name being called, and it was my neighbor. Her face came to my mind, and I immediately had the thought that she had died. I looked at the clock and it was a little after 4 a.m. I figured I was crazy, but as I drove up my driveway after my shift, her husband came out to tell me that she had passed at 4 a.m. I was stunned because I thought my mind was playing tricks on me since I was working in a spooky unit. Never did I think it was actually true. As I get older, I'm starting to get less fearful and thinking of exploring these psychic abilities further. Thank you, Julie. Our next story of the night comes to us from Nisa, and Nisa's story is called The Ghost That Likes My Camera. Nisa says, "Hi Nick, I've been listening to your podcast for about 2 months now and barely caught up. I listened to these podcasts at work when closing the store, and it gave me the idea to share one of my paranormal experiences I've had while working. One night while I was closing the store, I was counting the safe, making sure everything was in order, when I got a text from a friend asking if I wanted to hang out after work. I told them sure, and that I'd be ready in about 30 minutes. Well, I decided to send my mom a Snapchat picture, letting her know that I would be home later on because I would be out with friends. But before I sent the picture, I saw something really odd in the background of the photo. But I didn't think much of it, and I brushed it off as a smudge on my camera, and I decided to send her a text instead. My mom said, 'Okay, be careful and don't be out too late. I love you.' I told her I wouldn't be out too late and that I love her too. I continued taking pictures with Snapchat and kept getting the same result over and over again. I wanted to get to the bottom of it, so I used the face swap filter to see if I could get a look at the features of this black mass that kept appearing in my pictures. I looked around hoping to get it in frame until I finally found out where it was. But that was the worst mistake I've ever made in my entire life. The figure's face showed up onto my face, but what its features looked like was complete nightmare fuel. It was a pitch-black mass with a smile that sent shivers down my spine, and a stare that made my face turn pale. My friend asked if I was okay, and I told them to take me home so I could try to get some sleep and forget about what I just saw. Of course they did, and since then I've never used the face swap filter on Snapchat ever again, in fear of seeing that terrifying face stare right into my camera. Thank you for sharing my story if you are able, and maybe I'll tell more of my paranormal experiences." Our next story of the night comes to us from Lisa, and Lisa's story is called Doppelganger. Lisa says, "Hi there, Nick. I came across your podcast at the beginning of February and have been hooked on it ever since. It got me thinking of a few odd experiences I've had, and I thought I would share one that still has me wondering up to this day. Back in late 2019, I worked in a restaurant close to where I live. It was within a busy corner that had a Starbucks across the street, so for a full-time college student running on 3 hours of sleep, it was very convenient. Going into my shift one morning, I arrived at work early, so I headed over to Starbucks to buy a coffee to help me get through the shift. This day was a bit slow considering it was a Wednesday, so as I waited, the barista chatted with me for a bit. Jokingly, she asked if the first drink I got earlier wasn't strong enough. Confused, I told her that this was my first time coming in today, and if anything, I might need a second later tonight. She then asked if I had a twin sister, to which I answered no, just a brother. She seemed taken aback for a moment before telling me that about a half an hour earlier, someone who looked exactly like me came in, and she even called over her coworker who had attended to the person to confirm. I thought it was a little odd, but I laughed it off, saying it must have been my long-lost twin or something, before I headed off, and I didn't think much about it as I headed into work. I hadn't gone out to the dining area yet after clocking in, and had just been focused on taking a few sips of coffee and settling into NPC mode to power through the shift. As soon as one of my coworkers walked into the employee area, he had a double take when he saw me. My coworker told me that he was helping the server for a table with a group of people, and one of them looked like me. They thought I was going to eat before clocking in, but they didn't get a chance to come over to greet me while they were taking care of their other tables. Confused, I told him I had barely just arrived, and I asked where the girl had sat, because now I was curious. Although, when I walked with him to peek out into the dining area, they had finished up and already left. We asked the other worker who was bussing the table, who also had a double take looking towards the door and then back at me. They told me that the girl looked exactly like me, with short layered blonde hair with the roots peeking out a bit. I have dark brown hair but have been too lazy to get the roots touched up. Our faces, our styles, and the way we sounded was similar. They asked me if I had a twin as well, to which I answered no, but now I was a little uneasy. Whoever this person is, I missed her twice by a few minutes and couldn't help but wonder if I would eventually run into her or not. I told my friend this, and she told me about a movie that came out earlier in the year called Us, and it's about doppelgangers, and after watching it, I got a little scared, to say the least. I haven't had any more odd encounters like this since then, but couldn't help but wonder if any of your listeners have experienced anything similar. Thanks for reading, and I hope you and all the listeners have a safe and happy week. Our next story of the night comes to us from James, and James' story is called My First and Only Time I've Had Sleep Paralysis. James says, So I've never had sleep paralysis before, but I always hear stories on podcasts, and the one I always hear about is Shadow People of the Old Hag, but I've never heard about what I saw. So it was my girlfriend's birthday, and we went out of town and rented an Airbnb. We went to sleep on the first day, and that's when I woke up feeling something tugging on my feet. I opened my eyes and looked to the end of the bed, and I see long, pale fingers. I watched as its hands grabbed my feet, and it pulled itself up. Its face was pale. It had no facial features except for crevices where the eyes would be. It had a mouth that was large and black, and it kept crawling towards me. It didn't get all the way to me before I woke up. I actually woke my girlfriend up from screaming in my sleep. The thing looks like how I've seen the rake described, or if you've seen Pan's Labyrinth, it looked like the pale man, but with its skin tight against its body, and not saggy. Have you heard of anyone seeing something like that during sleep paralysis? I honestly hope I'm not alone. Have a good rest of your day. Your fan, James. As we bring tonight's episode to an end, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, and a special thank you goes out to Michael, Clay, Julie, Nisa, Lisa, and James for sharing their experiences. If you've witnessed something paranormal, I'd like to hear your story. You can write to me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or by visiting our website at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com. Or if you prefer to record your experience and send it to me, you can now do this on our website as well. You can also visit speakpipe.com/paranormalmysteries and record your story there. And don't forget that all of these links are in the show notes. And until next time, I hope you all have a great beginning to your week, and I look forward to seeing you back here on Wednesday as we continue our journey into the unexplained, right here on Paranormal Mysteries.